Hey everyone, today we're going to dig into something that millions of us practice, maybe even daily, yoga. But we're going to look past the poses and uncover the surprising and kind of hidden philosophical history behind its most important text, the Yoga Sutras. So let's just jump right in with a big question. For all the people who roll out a mat, we tend to think the philosophy behind it all comes from this one pure, unbroken line stretching back into ancient history. But what if I told you the real story is way more complicated, and honestly, a lot more fascinating?
And look, this is not just some dusty academic debate. We're talking about over 300 million people practicing yoga globally. So understanding where its core ideas actually came from, that's not just trivia. It gives us a much deeper connection to what we're actually doing on the mat.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to look beyond the physical postures, the asanas, and get right to the source code. You know, the philosophical engine of classical yoga. And that means we have to turn to one specific, incredibly influential text.
And that text is the Yoga Sutras. It's often credited to a sage named Patanjali, and it's basically a handbook of almost 200 short, potent verses. Think of it as the original instruction manual for the practice, the blueprint for how to calm your mind and achieve a state of liberation.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really weird turn. You'd think a text this central to modern yoga would have this continuous, celebrated history, right? Well, not so much. For hundreds of years, it was basically lost to time.
In fact, as historian David Gordon White points out, the sutras pretty much fell off the map. For centuries, there's just silence. No one's writing commentaries on it. No one's really talking about it. It wasn't until the 19th century that Western scholars basically dusted it off and brought it back into the spotlight, which is what really kicked off the global yoga boom we see today.
And this timeline, wow, this is where it all clicks into place. Modern scholars are pretty confident that the Yoga Sutras, in their final form, were put together somewhere around 300 to 500 CE. Now look at the timeline. That's almost 1,000 years after the Buddha lived. It's centuries after really sophisticated schools of Buddhist philosophy had been developed and were being debated all across India. That timing is everything.
So, what does that timing mean? Well, it means that whoever compiled the Yoga Sutras was living in a world saturated with Buddhist ideas. They weren't writing in a vacuum, and when you look at the text with that in mind, the footprints of Buddhist influence are absolutely everywhere.
You see, a lot of scholars now view Patanjali less as an inventor and more as a brilliant compiler. He was a genius at taking existing ideas floating around and organizing them into this elegant, coherent system. And the clearest evidence, the smoking gun really, is in the language itself. He straight up uses core Buddhist terms.
And just look at this. This table shows you just how direct that borrowing was. We're not talking about vague, similar ideas. These are foundational concepts in Buddhism, things like the four immeasurables, or the three kinds of suffering, that appear almost word for word right inside yoga's most important text. It's unmistakable.
I mean, let's just take this one as a perfect example. The four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. This whole ethical and meditative framework is classic Buddhism 101, and yet there it is, plain as day, in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, laid out as a key method for purifying your mind.
So, okay, you might be thinking, was this just a total copy-paste job? Not at all. And this is where it gets really clever. The author of the sutras was incredibly selective. They were creating a unique blend, pulling from different streams of thought for different parts of their system.
This chart really breaks it down. When it came to the ethical rules and physical disciplines, the sutras drew on much older, hardcore ascetic traditions, the very kinds of practices the Buddha himself actually tried and then rejected as being too extreme. But, and this is the key, when it came to the inner world, to the advanced theories of meditation and psychology, the text turned right to the incredibly sophisticated models that had been developed in Buddhism.
And if you need one final, mind-blowing piece of evidence, this is it. The name given to the ultimate, highest state of consciousness in the Yoga Sutras is Dharma Megha Samadhi, the cloud of Dharma concentration. This exact term is a major concept in Mahayana Buddhism, where it describes the final stage of a bodhisattva's journey. I mean, sharing the name for your ultimate goal, that's not a coincidence. That is a deep, profound link.
So the real takeaway here is that classical yoga philosophy wasn't born in a bubble. It was forged in this incredible, dynamic marketplace of ideas that was ancient India, where different schools were constantly borrowing, debating, and influencing one another. All right, so let's just quickly recap the big points. Yoga's philosophy isn't some single unchanging tradition.
The Yoga Sutras came along centuries after Buddhism was already a huge deal, and the text itself is this brilliant mashup. It took its rules for living from old-school asceticism, but it grabbed its advanced map of the mind straight from Buddhist psychology. What you get in the end is this amazing synthesis, a product of a truly shared philosophical heritage.
And this all leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to think about. By taking Buddhism's powerful meditation techniques and successfully plugging them into a God-centered or theistic framework, did the yoga school accidentally create a system that was so appealing it actually helped lead to the decline of Buddhism in India, its own homeland? It's a huge question, and it just goes to show that the flow of ideas can literally change history.